I'd like to call the Finance Administration Committee meeting to order. Everybody take their seats, and if we could get all the board members or committee members. Give me a second to get everybody seated. And our first order of business is roll call.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
Margaret Brown.
Here.
Henry Jones.
Here.
Fiona Ma.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Jason Perez.
Here.
Lynn Paquin for Betty.
Great, thank you. So it's February, so it's our election. I'm going to throw this over to Henry to run the election.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. So the nominations are now open for Chair of the Finance and Administration Committee. Mr. Miller.
My pleasure to nominate Teresa Taylor for Chair of the Finance and Administration Committee.
Okay, it's been nominated that Ms. Taylor be the Chair of the Finance and Administration Committee. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing no additional nominations, I would seek a motion to approve Mrs. Taylor as chair by acclamation. Moved by Mr. Miller and second by Ms. Paquin. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Congratulations, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. So I'm going to open the nominations for Vice Chair of Finance Administration. I'm going to call on Mr. Perez.
Thank you. I nominate Mr. Miller.
All right. Mr. Miller, David Miller has been nominated for Vice Chair of Finance Administration Committee. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, I need a motion to move that David become Vice Chair of Finance Administration.
By acclamation.
By acclamation.
I move. Second.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Mr. Jones. Mr. Miller is nominated by acclamation. Thank you. Yay, congratulations. Are we going to shift? All right, so give us a minute or two to shift over here.
We stay. We're good.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of the February 21st, 2019 Finance and Administration Committee timed agenda. I need a motion.
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Brown.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Jones. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the timed agenda has been approved. Thank you. And now we're going to move to our executive report. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Cohen with CalPERS. Just one item to highlight. As we've met the last couple of times, just wanted to give you an update on Paradise and Butte County. Last week, the governor did sign AB 72, which provides a property tax backfill for the next 3 years for Butte counties. So that should close off the financial situation for the county and the city, at least for the time being, but we'll continue to monitor their situation. And with that, I think we're probably ready to roll into the committee business.
Okay, great. So our first, next item is our action consent items. I need a motion to approve the action consent items. Moved by Mr. Jones.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. Action consent items pass. I didn't have anybody ask for anything to be pulled off the information consent items, so we will move on to item 7A, 2019 CalPERS Board of Administration Retired Member Election, Notice of Election. And with that, I have Ms. Malm.
Good morning, members of the Finance and Administration Committee. Congratulations, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Miller. Kim Malm, CalPERS team member. In front of you is an action item for the 2019 Retired Member Notice of Election. This election is to fill one seat currently held by Mr. Jones, Henry Jones, who has submitted his intent to run for re-election. The election begins on March 25th with the mailing of the Notice of Election to all CalPERS retired members. This agenda item is for approval for this Notice of Election. To start, I wanted to address a new development that will affect the logistics of this election. For the past 2 years, CalPERS board elections have been administered by a joint venture between Integrity Voting Systems and Votum, formerly Everyone Counts. Votum recently bought out Everyone Counts, which was the online and phone voting half of the joint venture. On February 19th, 2 days ago, Votum notified us that they have run into short-term liquidity issues resulting in restructuring and recapitalization of the company, which included layoffs. And again, this was 2 days ago after the agenda item has already been released. Votum has informed us that they're operating with a skeleton crew and that they are actively supporting their current customers, but that the future of their company is uncertain. Our election begins in March, and we have serious concerns about whether Votum will be able to meet our needs and expectations for this retired member election as required by the contract. Therefore, yesterday, we sent a termination letter to all parties in the joint venture. We emailed them and we sent a hard copy. We are working towards an agreement with the other partner in the joint venture agreement, Integrity Voting Systems, to obtain the services consistent with the terms of the contract, but without Votum's involvement. Due to the urgency of this situation, we will be pursuing an exemption from competitive bid with IVS for the 2019 retiree election. This contract will then go back out to bid on the street in 2020. What I've presented to you does not change the nomination petition process that begins March 25th, and therefore we would like the committee's approval to begin the election as scheduled. In your folder, you will find a revised notice of election for approval. There is also copies in the back of the room. Because of the move away from Votum, the revised notice leaves the customer service phone number and the location of the tabulation to be determined. IVS expects to provide the electronic tabulation in Sacramento with a time of public viewing to be announced promptly following the completion of the paper ballot process. The specific location of the tabulation is still to be determined. The customer service phone number will change as well. Again, this is all very new. We'll come back to the committee with an amended notice of election to specify these two items. Now, if I can get back to the original agenda item. The retired member may be nominated in this election if their retirement is effective date is on or before the date of the notice of election, which is March 25th, 2019. Retired members whose effective date of retirement is on or before July 1st, 2019 are eligible to vote in this election. The notice of election outlines the election schedule and procedures for becoming a candidate. Potential candidates must submit a nomination petition containing at least 250 eligible signatures no later than 5 p.m. on May 16, 2019, to become a candidate in this election. Candidate statement booklets and ballots will be mailed on August 30th, and the completion of the election will be September 30th, 2019. On October 1st, the paper ballot process will begin at 7720 Hardison Road, Everett, Washington. Public viewing will be allowed. Upon completion of the paper ballot process, the time for public viewing of tabulation will be announced promptly. Again, we expect the electronic tabulation process to be held in Sacramento, California, at a location to be determined. Each candidate must be elected, the candidate must be elected by majority vote. If there is no majority vote winner in the primary election, then a runoff election will be held between the two candidates who receive the highest number of votes. If a runoff election is required, ballots will be mailed on November 8th, and the voting period will end on December 9th. The term of office for the newly elected board member will begin on January 16th, 2020, and end on January 15th, 2024. This concludes my presentation, Madam Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. Our first question is from Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Malm, for the update. As many people on the staff and this board are aware, as a candidate and as a board member, I have serious concerns about online and phone voting. Those are two of my primary issues. I think that our experiment into that has been unsuccessful because the idea was to increase voting, and we did not get that outcome. But there are bigger issues with online and phone voting in terms of not having a true audit tracking and just the security of the information. More importantly, though, as we saw in the last election, when the ballots were scanned, that process actually went well this time. A year ago, 2 years ago, it did not go well. This year, the opening of the ballots and the scanning went well. But then again, when the data was transferred to California, there was a 2-hour delay, and I still don't know what happened, but there was a problem, and I don't know what that was. But I'm hopeful that we would just go back to paper ballots and count the paper ballots. Take the paper and count them. That is the most secure and unhackable way to run an election. I did speak with our CEO late yesterday afternoon about this, and Ms. Frost said that we couldn't do an emergency through the Office of Administrative Law. I actually think we should try it and do just plain paper ballots. I don't know that IVS has any public agency online electronic voting experience. I know they do it in private sector, but I don't think they have any governmental agency experience. And I think it's an experiment, and I really wouldn't want to have a failure. I just wish we would try to do the OAL, go for paper ballots, and just count them. Get rid of the electronic and tabulation, because you can't see what they're counting.
The electronic and telephone voting was something that we were going to be discussing with the committee and board in this next year. 2020 is our off cycle, and that's where we make a lot of our changes to the election that you guys would like to see. So we had that teed up to discuss whether or not you wanted to continue to pursue online, telephone, and paper ballots, or if you wanted a different change. That is teed up for the off year. Our current regulations do say that we will allow online and telephone voting in addition to paper ballots, which means that we have to allow it. We've pulled the emergency rulemaking actions by OAL, and it states that in order to do an emergency regulation, it would have to avoid serious harm to the public peace, health, safety, or general welfare. And we don't believe that meets that criteria. So I would like to work with you guys after this retiree election to look into the possibility of how you want to change the election, whether it be paper and online, paper only.
I just have a follow-up. So just so you know, in my opinion, I think fair elections are in the general welfare for this agency. And I think we should at least ask OAL. Did we ask OAL about this?
In the last 48 hours, no, I have not.
Maybe we could do that before we decide not to go on with IVS doing the electronic and phone voting. Can you actually tell us how much experience IVS has had with electronic and phone voting with public agencies?
IVS would need to partner, subcontract the IVR piece of it. They do not have the experience to do the IVR, but it would be a subcontract through the IVS contract. They have made contact with a couple of vendors that are in that arena that they've done business with before, and they have stated that they are 100% confident that they can do this work for us with the expectations that are currently in the existing contract for the same term of money, and all the terms remain the same.
My concerns are noted for the record. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm supportive of moving forward, but I will say that, with my long history of concerns over issues with CalPERS elections, tempered by CalPERS responsiveness to where those represented opportunities for improvement over the many years since I first ran in 2001. I think this is something that in the off year we should have a much more robust look at. I know that the other options for voting to try to make it easier, more convenient, to try to improve participation were really, I think, well considered, well thought out. They didn't necessarily provide the kind of results that we were hoping for, but I don't know that we've really looked at that in a really analytical way, because I'm not sure that I have looked at the numbers or been presented the numbers in a way that I could say, where were we trending, and had we not done that, would be in a worse situation with participation in our last few cycles. So I would really like to get a sense of, what were the impacts, and what could we do to continue finding opportunities to improve our processes. So I'm just hoping that staff will help us by providing some of that kind of analysis, that we can really see how well was this received by those that did vote, and what could we do to make more of an impact in future participation.
Certainly.
So it's been my experience from looking at the numbers that our first year, there wasn't a lot of access, but this year there seems to be a lot more access into the online.
There was certainly more participation as far as the online aspect of it, but not an increased participation in the voting at all.
Right. But I think it's switching over.
In the voting participation.
Right. I think it's switching over, and I think it's imperative that we give our members any way possible to vote. As we move forward, we can all have a robust discussion on whether we agree with that or not. Okay. These ballots that come to people's homes a month ahead of time, part of the reason why there's a lack of participation is people throw those away. They don't know what it is, and they just throw them away. So I think it's really important that we offer the other options. That's my stance. Mr. Miller is asking for some stats, and I think it might be important to show the increase to the board from year one to year two, because we've only done it twice. And there was definitely a larger population accessing it this time, even though the voting population didn't itself go up. So I think that's important to show. And I believe that as we move, our millennials are going to be the people running this stuff in a few years, right? Mm-hmm. They would prefer to see that. They don't want a piece, they're going to throw that away. That's part of the reason we're having trouble getting the voting from paper ballots now. So anyway, if we could get some of that information for the board for the next discussion, that would be awesome.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Ms. Brown.
I guess if we're going to have a discussion on that, I think we need to bring in experts on electronic voting, online voting, because all the experts say it's not safe, it's not secure. And so while we may like online voting and it's easy for the millennials, it is not unhackable. We see this nationally, and CalPERS is not exempt from that. And so vendors don't have a way to do online electronic voting, and if you look, that's the way we're trending. We just can't do it because we like it. It needs to be safe and secure. That is number one. Thank you.
So let me ask a question. One of the concerns for electronic voting nationally is there's no paper trail. Do we have a paper trail or no?
No.
There's no way to provide.
They do not
It doesn't
provide us a trail as to who voted and how they voted. No, we do not have anything
So
like
it
that.
doesn't create a paper ballot. Can it create a paper ballot? Is there a way we can discuss that with of the vendor in the future?
Create a paper ballot.
An audit.
It's basically an audit showing. So, for example, we had machines hacked nationally. So one of the issues was let's create, rather than just voting on your computer screen, that also creates a paper trail as well. So, I mean, we can discuss that.
I think that's something that we can discuss and potentially even have the Secretary of State perform that audit as we don't want to be a part
Right,
of performing
we
that audit,
shouldn't.
but potentially have Secretary of State perform the audit of the vendors.
Paper ballot, or I'm sorry, electronic
Yes.
ballots. And then, I don't know, as to Ms. Brown's request for expert testimony, it might be something we consider for everybody to.
When we have the off-year conversation after this election, we'll be sitting with the board and having a conversation of what changes you want to see in regulation for your next cycle of elections.
Right.
And that we can absolutely look into bringing experts for online voting systems and bringing the data that Mr. Miller has just recently asked for, and potentially looking into like an audit.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Perez.
Thank you. Kim, I'm sorry you have to deal with this only 48 hours after it's been dropped. But I echo Brown and Miller where we have to, this is kind of important. I can see where the Russians would want to hack us. And,
Russians are going to hack the CalPERS election.
right, Russians are going to hack us and put whoever they want on the board. But it needs to be safe, tight.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Brown.
I wasn't thinking the Russians, I was thinking the Chinese, but okay. No, seriously, though, we don't necessarily need to have the experts come in and testify. We just need to look at the research and have a report written, in my opinion. The other thing, though, is what we're talking about an audit trail is right now when you vote by absentee ballot, you get a little number. And that number tells you vote, and you can look up to see if they got your vote. It doesn't say how you voted, but just that your vote counted. And that's what we're talking about is an audit trail. And we don't get that. When you vote online, there is no secure audit trail that you voted and your vote counted. You can't go back and say, my number was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 counted. So thank you. That's what we're talking about. We don't want to know how Ms. Taylor or Ms. Brown voted, just that it got counted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we're done with that item. And we will move on to, it looks like, 8A, our annual diversity report. Oh, it was an action item. I apologize. It was an action item. I heard talking over here. I couldn't hear what you were saying. All we need is to approve the election, approve the notice of election for 2019 CalPERS Board of Administration retired member election. I need a motion.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Mr. Miller. Second? Seconded by Ms. Paquin. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All those opposed?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Jones needs to abstain.
Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because this election is the seat that I serve in, I will abstain from voting.
Okay. We have Ms. Brown, a no. Mr. Jones abstained. The motion carries. Thank you. And now we can move on. Our annual diversity report. Who's going for Brad?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Brad Pacheco, CalPERS team. We're pleased to be here this morning to present our annual report on our enterprise diversity and inclusion efforts during the last fiscal year. I'm joined by my colleagues Kelly Fox, who's our Chief of Stakeholder Relations, Kim Mom, Chief of Operations and Support Services, and Samiso Nizima, Investment Director of Corporate Governance. The report before you highlights our ongoing work to advance D&I initiatives with our employees, our business partners, and the companies that we invest in around the world. And our focus over the last year has been on increasing engagement of leaders and team members, expanding our training within our enterprise, and integrating best practices across the organization. So now I'd like to turn to Kelly to continue our presentation.
All right, thank you, Brad. And okay, thank you, Brad. Madam Chair, thank you and congratulations, you and Mr. Miller, on your election. Our D&I strategy has 3 focus areas, and those focus, you've got the material in your packets that you've had. It includes our the talking points as well as the information here on the slides and the actual report that has been submitted and is online now. So given that, our number 1, talent management is our first focus area. As you can see there, our efforts to attract, develop, and advance highly qualified members. Education, expand and strengthen our D&I education to increase inclusion and engagement across the enterprise, as well as communication, leveraging our communication channels to present a consistent message, increase our team member involvement, and showcase CalPERS as a destination employer. So measuring our success. In 2016, we established a new workforce D&I strategic measure through the Employee Engagement Survey. We did experience a 1.7% increase over the 1.6 annual goal. As you can see from our target, we're trying to increase by 8% over a 5-year period, so the simple math is trying to increase that by 1.6% per year. And we did exceed that last year with a 1.7. And we also gained insight of our workforce to better pivot our efforts to be more impactful. So some of our D&I accomplishments over the last year. In 2017-18, our team began implementation of our enterprise D&I strategy to increase collaboration, communication, engagement across the enterprise. We were on target to raise the engagement by the 8% by 2022, and our team also conducted workshops and presentations to over 40 CalPERS teams, including our Senior Leadership Council, and as a result, senior leadership engagement increased with employee resource group efforts. And so at this point, we'll turn it over to Samiso, who's going to give some information on slides 6 and 7 related to corporate boards.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Samiso Nzima, Investment Director, Global Equity. So in terms of our work around corporate board diversity, the accomplishments that we had, we got 30% of the companies that we engaged starting at the beginning of fiscal 2017 to actually add an element of diversity that they didn't have at the beginning of July 2017. And I'll be back in March at the March Investment Committee meeting to actually give more updated numbers, because these numbers are always changing as we move along. The second point there, 3D, which was co-founded by CalSTRS and CalPERS, where we have had 25 directors from 3D actually appointed to corporate boards. So that's something which we actually, track on an ongoing basis, and we discuss with ECOLA and try and get as many candidates, potential director candidates, on there for companies to go and look at. Moving on to slide 7. So what we also do really is on the idea of advocacy, where we petition together with other investors in terms of disclosures, petitioning the Securities and Exchange Commission to get companies to disclose this information. Because one of the challenges when it comes to corporate board diversity is that the disclosures are not there. And really you have to scrap the data, look at pictures, look at last names to really tell, how diverse a particular board is. So we continue to work with other investors and others in terms of petitioning the regulators to make this something which companies can disclose. That concludes my presentation on this.
So the next slide is in regards to the supplier participation. And we have continued our commitment, CalPERS commitment to the 3% of all contracts to disabled veterans business enterprises and 25% to small and micro businesses. I'm actually pleased to report that we did better than that this year. We achieved a 3.09% DVBE participation level, which is an increase of 0.30 over last year, and a 25.04% small business participation, which is an increase of 5.86% over last year. We were able to achieve this by utilizing our small business DVBE advocate and participating in bidder conferences, networking with DVBE's internal department training, and DVBE compliance monitoring. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tina.
Good morning. Tina Campbell, CalPERS team. I will be covering 3 areas of the D&I. So first I want to talk about our outreach efforts, and CalPERS Career Services Unit, which is a unit within Human Resources, attended 23 outreach events in 2017. 8 of our outreach events this year were focused specifically on the veteran community. That was one of the areas that we had selected to do a better job of reaching out to, was our veteran community. And we also attended venues with the focus on investment, accounting, and IT classifications, as well as hosting tables at 7 colleges, plus a few business-specific events, such as the accounting and investments. CalPERS attended the annual Diversity Employment Day Career Fair in Sacramento to ensure we're introducing potential diverse candidates to CalPERS employment opportunities. HRSD will continue to evaluate our outreach efforts to determine if we are focused on the right outreach events to ensure we are continuing to recruit a diverse workforce. Of special note, CalPERS participated in Government Operations SEIU Local 1000 IT Apprenticeship Program in fiscal year 17-18 and again this year. This program helps team members in generalist classifications move into the IT career field by providing them on-the-job training as well as college courses that are paid for by a grant. CalPERS also partnered with Mayor Darrell Steinberg for 1,000 Strong. 1,000 Strong is a citywide approach to workforce development that begins with our youth. This initiative seeks to reward our youth with various incentives to show them we value the work they do while helping them prepare for the future. All 1,000 Strong students complete 40 hours of 21st century workplace skills training to prepare them for the workplace, and all students were supported by professionals that served as mentors to ensure students have the tools and wraparound support they need to be successful on the job. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Investment Office. They accepted 5 of these participants in fiscal year 17-18. 3 of those have stayed on with the Investment Office to continue to support them, so we're really proud of them and our investment team for taking that on. CalPERS also supported hiring through the state's Limited Examination and Appointment Program, also known as LEAP. The LEAP program is designed to help persons with disabilities get jobs in the California State Civil Service. LEAP is an alternative to the traditional testing process, allowing applicants to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and abilities through on-the-job testing. In 2017, CalPERS hired 7 LEAP candidates, and so far this fiscal year, CalPERS has hired 3 LEAP candidates. Lastly, CalPERS has enhanced our social media presence by advertising our job openings on LinkedIn, the Robert Twigo Foundation, Twitter, and Facebook. We have seen a lot of success with our expanded partnership with LinkedIn, in particular with candidates that are able to actively recruit based on current and past employment history, certifications, and knowledge. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on that piece.
All right. I do have questions, so I'm going to start with Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. Maybe I'll put them all out, and then the appropriate person can respond. The first one is on slide 7, regarding the Security and Exchange Commission petitions. I'd like to know what kind of success have we had in terms of getting positive responses from the SEC? And if we have not been getting positive responses, what can this board do to enhance those positive responses? The next question is on page 8. The 3% and 25% commitments, are those CalPERS commitments, or are they state designated commitments?
Those are state designated commitments.
Okay, thank you. The next page on 9, the Twigo Foundation, some time ago, years ago now that I think about it, we used to have the Twigo Fellow Day here at CalPERS, where these bright, engaging students from universities and women and minorities would come in and spend a day in our investment office, and hopefully many times they were impressed, and when they graduated, then they'd come and work for CalPERS. So where is that program is the question, and why haven't it continued? So those are the questions I have so far.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of the SEC petition, as of today, really, the companies are not required to, disclose, the diversity in terms of what will be information that is useful to investors. So if you measure success in terms of the final outcome, I would say that has not really been successful. But I would add to that, yesterday I was actually talking to a number of other funds where we're trying to see what can we do, especially given some of the activities with the legislature, with representative mix bill on corporate board diversity and stuff like that, to say what are the things that we can do in terms of pushing and helping and showing that investors are concerned and want this information disclosed by companies. So that's something we can, when I come back in March investment committee, I can give an update in terms of where we are and other things that we're doing in that space.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
And Mr. Jones, regarding the Twigo Foundation, I'm very familiar with the program and the students that have come here in past years. And I think in the transition of our Chief Investment Officer, let us talk to Ben in the investment office and see where that contact is, and we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, but thank you very much, because as you know, I'm on the board of Twigo, and we get these students present to us and about their goals and aspirations, and it's the brightest in young people coming before, and they're looking for opportunities to get into the financial industry. So
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk to our investment office and follow up.
All right, Madam Chair, we've got just a couple slides, just the demographic information that's of note here, and the information is there in your documents. I think it just goes without saying that the numbers are what they are, and they tell us where we are and where we've been, and gives us an idea of where we want to be as an organization, as an enterprise. The one here on slide 11 is a document that was put together, or at least a graph that was put together at the request of the board from a year ago, and it was ethnicity by specific programs. So what you see there are all the branches of CalPERS, of the enterprise, and then the demographic information underneath. And then same information, 12, is our senior leaders, our team leaders, which are our manager 1 and 2s, and then our team members, and then our gender demographics on slide 15, and then gender by those same branches of the enterprise. And then the last slide there is our, not the last slide, but the last demographic slide here is our generational demographics at CalPERS.
Okay.
So, our next steps here for our diversity and inclusion strategy, we are on track to meet that goal again. We hope to implement our best practices for hiring and capturing self-identifying data, develop our enterprise steering committees for our D&I initiatives, and then collaborate with CalSTRS to develop the content and host the next, in which we are in the process of hosting the next CalPERS and CalSTRS Diversity Forum, June 10th and 11th. I believe it's at the Sheraton Hotel here in Sacramento. And before I finish, I would like to recognize our Diversity Outreach Program team members that are in the audience here. If they would please stand up. All right, thank you. Do we have any of our employee resource groups? Okay, they're probably watching, but we have a number of folks that are elected to leadership positions in our employee resource groups with our diversity inclusion group and our disability advisory committee. I'd like to thank them for their work as well. So we are open to any additional questions that you might have for our panel.
I do have a couple of questions by board members. I just wanted to thank you all very much for the presentation. I also want to commend you for the work you're doing at corporate boards, the work you're doing within our own organization, incorporating Mayor Steinberg's 1,000 strong or whatever it is. Makes me think of something else. But anyway, so I'm just very pleased to see this. One thing for some of our new board members, Samiso, I was wondering if we could kind of explain right now and maybe provide some white papers or something at a later date on the board books, why diversity is so important in the financial industry.
Yeah, I think we can provide additional research in terms of why we think board diversity is important. But I think just briefly to say that really there is empirical evidence that shows that when you have a diverse group of people, they tend to make much better decisions. They tend to, add to the investment outcomes as opposed to having just, one, homogeneous group of people. And again, the definition of diversity, it's really broad. You're talking gender, ethnicity, background, experience, geography, tenure, age. So it's not,
education.
It's really a broad definition of what diversity entails, and really the empirical research is out there to show that there is an investments and business case for that, and we'll provide that information through the channels.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, because we have some new board members, and I think it would be good information to have. Mr. Fox, I just had one question because it cracked me up that I saw this. BSU, I don't know who that is, but they have all females.
Board Services Unit.
Board Services Unit, okay.
It was not intentional to have that pop quiz there with all those acronyms.
That's what I was trying to figure out. I was like, what is that? All right, Ms. Brown.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, because that is my first comment. We need to try to remove the acronyms. INVO, ECOM. I've been here a year. Each PBB, I'm sure it's something. Health plan, something. Okay, let's just put a footnote. You got a lot of room down there next to the CalPERS logo. It'd be very helpful, not just for new board members. How about the public who wants to know? That'd be very helpful. Just like Board Services Unit, that's the only one I know.
See, I didn't
See, there you
think
go. Or it's Boise State. Okay. So I want to go back to something that Sumizo said, and can you pronounce your last name for me? It's Mr.
Nzima.
Nzima, okay. Because everyone just called you Sumizo.
Sumizo, so that's okay.
Okay. So you talked about, corporate boards and trying to track the gender and diversity, and you said you're looking at pictures and last names. So, I mean, is that you? Is that your staff? Because my last name is Brown. I don't think you'd know what ethnicity I am, maybe by looking at my picture or my last name, but it's Hispanic. So, just curious how that works for you guys.
Yeah, so it's not my staff actually doing that. So when we started looking at this in July 2017, we went out to third-party data providers and asked them to, looking at the Russell 3000 and say, can you provide and tell us, in terms of diversity of the boards? And when we looked at the data that they actually had, maybe there was only about 60 to 70% which was the same in terms of identifying whether someone, is, a particular ethnicity or gender and so forth. And so we had to go back and say, well, what about the, this other, 30% where you guys are saying different things? And they came back and say, well, it's not, because this data is not disclosed, we actually have to go through and, look at last names and try and guess some of it and so forth. So that's part of the problem, that if companies are not disclosing this, then the people, the providers, the data providers have to try and go through certain, use different methods to try and come up with accurate data. So that's the challenge, and that's why we're trying and working hard to petition the SEC to make this in terms of, not just race, not just gender, not just ethnicity, but really to have a skills matrix and which really shows the diversity of the board. In its entirety. So that's the challenge there. But it's something which is out there, and I think that it's getting better now, because a lot of investors are demanding and asking companies to do this. So there are some companies which are self-reporting and doing that, but it's nowhere near where you can just use one data set and be comfortable that it's identifying correctly.
And so for our own staff, when we hire, you have the option of disclosing or not disclosing. So I do see you have a known here in terms of diversity. Is that correct? So we're not making any assumptions about staff if they choose not to disclose. Is that? I think that's more this end.
Yeah, Dan Bienvenu, MID of Global Equity. Yes, that's correct. And really what Samiso's speaking to, and even the SEC petition, the challenge here is there's a tension between getting data and then privacy issues, right? So it's much more simpler. There's much less tension around a topic like gender. When you get to ethnicity, when you get to gender identity, when you get to sexual orientation, other things like that, there are real privacy issues here that are just, and we certainly, that's one of the SEC's concerns, is making sure that we honor people's right to privacy while also getting investors the data they need to the extent possible.
Yeah, and we heard, I don't know, 2 months ago about that having, maybe gender is not an issue, but certainly maybe even ethnicity could be an issue in other countries if you're on a board and things like that. So I want to be, while we'd like to have the data, I want to be sensitive that we're not putting anybody in jeopardy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paquin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question for Ms. Campbell. So I appreciate the information and the outreach to different sites and using different job recruitment tools. So have you been tracking or noticing an increase in diverse candidates who are applying through those sites?
Yeah, so we're actually working on trying to get more automation. We generally, the way folks find out about our jobs is through CalCareers, which is CalHR's website. And so we don't know if our outreach events are effective. What we do is we send out surveys to them. We did 91 of those that we did outreach and sent surveys to, came back and told us CalCareers was the place that they learned about the job. Whether or not we're getting diverse candidates for job applicants, we are not allowed to ask ethnicity or gender questions, but on exams we are. So there's really nothing in place that tells us that. What we rely on is the numbers that Mr. Fox showed and provided. What we're trying to do, though, is be more cognizant of the makeup of the workforce where we might find more diverse candidates. And this year we did focus on not just candidates with disabilities, but also veteran candidates, because they also bring some different diverse ways of thinking and just the way that they work. And we wanted to incorporate more of that also into CalPERS. But to answer, the short answer is we don't have any way to actually track that other than once they're hired and they self-identify what, if we're talking just mostly ethnicity, we're able to gather that information. And again, it's what they self-identify, and that's pretty limited. We actually do find that the CalHR did a survey, I think it's been about 1.5 years now, where they asked all of us, all state employees, to identify, and I think that that is a lot better data than the way that we do it now. So that is really the way that we find out if we're, whether the outreach events, we do survey those attendees, but we don't know whether or not they're actually joining CalPERS. And when they do, what we are learning is most of them are finding out about our jobs through the CalCareers website. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And I had one other question on the 3D database. And I was curious how much involvement CalPERS still has with Equilar in further developing that database and looking at the results.
I think that's what that turned into.
We still have, we actually retain a consultant who actually helps with some of the outreach. And we're in constant communication with Equilar and you know, just trying to understand not only you know, trying to understand the composition of the candidates there in terms of their diversity and so forth. So that's something which, although we are not on a day-to-day basis, but we always keep an eye on, and you know, either directly or through the consultant that we return, I think, in terms of maintaining that and looking at it.
Thank you. And so would you say that that's regular reports you get from Equilar, or is it just on an ad hoc basis?
I think mostly it's from Equilar directly to us as on an ad hoc basis, and you know, but from the consultant, I think we get a report every 3 months. I mean, I have to verify that, but I think it's every 3 months in terms of looking at where we are, what the activities and what the outreach has been happening on that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Perez.
Thank you. It's a silly question. First perspective, I'm my grandparents are from Mexico. Doing the 23andMe says I'm mostly indigenous. I guess that's the correct term. Throughout my career, I haven't been held back or pushed forward because of how I identify with anything. My question is then, does this hinder the people we're trying to engage in, the boards and their employees, including our own enterprise? Does that hurt us when we're just trying to hire the best person for the job?
I could take that one. I believe the answer is no, and the reason for that is we do hire the best person for the job, and we actually can't take into consideration other things other than the merits that they bring to their qualifications and what they bring to the job. So I don't believe that based on gender or race or anything else that we're not getting the best candidate for the job. I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but just from a hiring perspective, we look at your minimum qualifications, then we go through the selection process, which includes the interview and all of that. And as I mentioned earlier, we can't actually even ask those questions either through the interview process or on the application. So I believe the answer is no, that it doesn't.
So we're just looking, excuse me, so we're just looking at reporting, not so much, hey, we need to hire a certain amount of these people, so.
Correct. We don't have a target. Like,
We're not
you know,
allowed to do that.
We're not allowed to do that. And we don't do that.
And we're just asking the SEC to report, even if it's old white guys on a board, we just want to know that.
That I'll kick to the investment office. I was talking about hiring of state employees for CalPERS, but I'll defer to the investment office. Maybe they know that.
Yes, for the SEC, it's just about data disclosure. That, but I will say there's a difference. The state government, California state government, we are under Prop 209. We're not allowed to have any advantaging based on gender, ethnicity, any of those things. Corporations can do that, and some do that. However, our work with the SEC is really just about disclosure. Just we believe, to Samisa's previous point, the empirical results show that business decisions, portfolio management decisions, otherwise will be made better when diverse perspectives are brought to bear on those decisions. So we just want to see the data on and I think something that we've been focusing on is the diversity part, but I think the inclusion part is also very critical, that you have to both have the diverse perspectives, but then also include those diverse perspectives in the decision making. And what we want to know is, how do you get those, and then how is the board sort of overseeing their strategic policies around diversity and inclusion?
And if I may add, Mr. Perez, just to Tina's comments, I agree with her. We always hire the best candidate. I think our efforts here collectively are trying to expand the pool of candidates and provide avenues of outreach to a broader candidate pool that may represent greater diversity, so they have access to apply for jobs and also work here at CalPERS.
That makes much better sense. Thank you, guys. And
Great.
ma'am.
All right, Mr. Miller.
Just to kind of touch on Mr. Pacheco kind of already alluded to it, this idea that from my perspective, it's about broadening those candidate pools. It's about helping ensure not just today in a given specific hiring decision that we are getting the best candidates. And we know that part of the value of being able to engage across the entire community of potential job applicants, and again, not just locally, nationally, globally, in the financial services industry, as well as kind of my background as a scientist, we look at it as a strategic imperative, because the person who may be the person who would solve some of these huge problems as part of a team of scientists, whether it be cancer, whether it be global climate change, might be someone who would not have those opportunities the way the world works today. And so in addition to just trying to improve our current decision making, and in addition to trying to help push the corporate world, the financial services world, the world of medicine, the world of business, to see that value of diversity in terms of performance and bottom line dollars, it's also the strategic to also encourage the youth. It's like, no, you don't have to choose this path because the opportunities aren't available to you. We want you to go that way. We want to bring all kind of talent into science, into engineering, into financial services, into actuarial, whereas right now some of those are relatively exclusive. And so eliminating that exclusivity and really having opportunity for everyone, regardless of their immediate circumstances, is a long-term goal to optimizing performance in almost any field. And so I think in terms of us as a strategic long-term investor, us as a public pension and health benefit fund that has to have a very long view, because we're recruiting brand new members to government service today. And we've also got retired members who are counting on us. And that performance of our organizations, of our funds, of our partners, of the firms we invest in, of the economy, of the state, the nation, the world, it's all tied into maximizing human potential. And so to me, this is just very encouraging, and I just really applaud the work that staff's doing and the leadership CalPERS has shown in these areas. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank you all for your report. That was very good, and we appreciate it. We have, hold on. Oh, Henry.
Okay.
No one was there forever. Go ahead, Henry.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think that your request to share the research data regarding corporate board of directors would be very informing, because we've received that data, and we invest in over 10,000 companies all over the world, and there's a whole body of research that shows that those corporations that have diverse boards outperform those that do not. And that's very important to us, because that's why we invest in companies, get the better, higher returns. So I think it would really be enlightening when that information is provided.
So yeah, that was a request from the chair. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Jones. And thank you very much again. Anybody else? No. Okay, we will move on to our item 9, our long-term 9A, our long-term care evaluation report. And that's an actuarial report. And they are all coming up here.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Congratulations to Ms. Taylor and Mr. Miller. Today we are here, Fritzy Archuleta, CalPERS team member. Today we are here to present the long-term care actuarial evaluation report. And with me is Flora Hu, Senior Life Actuary.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Flora Hu, CalPERS team member. This agenda item presents the 2018 Long-Term Care Program Annual Evaluation Report. The results of this valuation indicated a margin of 1.2% and a funded ratio of 101%. Several factors that impacted the margin either negatively or positively after 2017. I'd like to refer you to the first table on page 3 of the agenda item, which shows a list of all factors that impacted the margin and changed the margin from 2017, which was negative 1.45%, to a positive 1.2% in 2018. First, I'd like to go through those negative factors impacted the margin. One major assumption we made for the 2018 valuation was the mortality improvement factors. We adopted the same mortality improvement assumptions as CalPERS pension, and also employed those as the morbidity improvement factors. Those changes had the biggest negative impact on the margin. Another factor that had a negative impact on the margin was the investment return in fiscal year 2017-18, which was 4%, lower than the assumed 5.25%. Other negative impacts came from the updated lapse assumption and the expense assumptions. All those negative impacts mentioned above decreased the margin more than 6%. This is the second valuation report produced by using the results from the new first principles model. This year, we made some revisions and refinements to the model, and those modeling changes helped actually remove some unintended conservatism from the model, and that had the biggest positive impact on the margin. In fiscal year 2017-18, the actual premium we received was 1% higher than projected, and the actual claim payments were more than 5% lower than projected. The better than expected liability cash flow had a small positive impact on the margin. Last year, we had an actual gain from the demographic change. In addition, the updated morbidity assumption also helped increase the margin slightly. The aggregate impact of all those positive changes to the margin is more than 9%. The 2018 valuation margin is positive, and the funded status is more than 100%. With the adoption of the new first principles model, we have important statistics on the more granular level for analysis. With those new information available, we can better monitor the program along with the emerging experiences from the program. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. And congratulations, 101%, very good. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. We didn't put the tables up for the audience, and this is my first time looking at this. So I want to go back to just to kind of get a little primer here. When I look at the first table in the analysis, I'm trying to see what page this is, where you talk about present value, future benefits. You have 8 things listed there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we look at the changes from 2017 to 2018. So present value, future benefits went down, so that's a bad thing, right? Help me, right? When I read across one?
That's a good thing. It means
it's a good thing. Present value, future benefits.
Yes, it means the future payments we're going to
payments. Those go down. So go down is a good thing. Present value, future expenses
increased slightly.
Okay, so that's bad
because we changed our expense assumption.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, and then future premiums went down, so that's good.
For the fund.
I cannot say that's a good thing or bad thing because of the attendance of our population for the program. The average attendance is about 78. So we assume, in the future with more people terminate, so the premium will be less. Yeah.
Right. So really what I'm interested in is lines 6 and 7. So can you just explain to me what the valuation margin is? Because it was negative 30, it was 35 million was coming off the numbers, and then this year it's 28 million to the positive. Is that right? Explain to me what that means. Line 6.
Okay, line 6. That's the margin, which is the differences between the current asset and the future liability. The future liability, also called accrued liability in the private industry, is called a reserve, which is equivalent to the future benefits and expenses less future premiums. It means how much we owe in the future.
Great. Okay. And so then I understand the margin and the funded status. Okay. So you talked, one more question. You talked about the morbidity assumptions change. They went down or they went up?
The morbidity assumption change actually helped improve the margin a little bit this year.
So we think more people are going to die? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Or okay.
Morbidity.
Sorry,
mortality.
I didn't want to say that out loud.
I'm just trying to figure out. So the morbidity assumptions helped us, which means more people were passing away. Okay, that's lovely. All right. I know it's your job.
They correlate to each other, morbidity and mortality.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll have more conversation maybe offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rubalcava.
Thank you. Very good report. I had a question on the discount rate. I know there's in the appendix, there's you talk about discount, but on the assumptions, appendix C, I like how you, I was very impressed how I never seen that, where you actually lay out the steps to calculate some of your factors and rates. But let me get to the page again, I'm sorry. I thought there would be more questions before me, sorry. On the discount rate, let me see if I can find it, how this thing froze. Shoots. On the discount rate, if I can remember, it talks about a change in the method, and I was wondering what the change was. And there was also something about that the rate, I can't get it to move. Froze.
Is it page 29?
I don't know, mine froze.
Discount rate increased by 0.05%.
Yeah, I mean, I know there was it said in February 2018, the new discount rate was adopted. It was because of a previous study, but then it made reference to a future asset allocation. So I was wondering how we could predict the future that well, but it was okay. But my question was more about the second paragraph. I can't find it. I'm sorry. I apologize. Mm-hmm. But it made it reference to a change in methodology. So I was wondering what that change was in determining the discount rate methodology.
Let me see the second paragraph, right?
Yeah, I think there's something about, I can't find it right now. Sorry. My table froze.
I think for more detailed information, we can find data from the agenda item in February 2018. We had a specific agenda item explaining how we developed this new discount rate. The old one was 5.75 with the updated probably market capital assumptions. And the 2012 asset allocation adopted by the board. So we recalculated the discount rate.
No, I understand it was recalculated. I just want to know, it makes a reference to a change in the method of calculation. That's how I read it. Is that
methodology that you were using
it wrong? Because I was here in February when we voted on the discount change.
We actually didn't change the method of calculating the discount rate.
Well, that's what it seems to read. A new cost method or some cost. I don't have the actual language in front of me, but I remember reading it. And I was trying to.
Yeah, I think I can understand how you would get there, but just to clarify, we did not change the way that we calculated the discount.
Yeah, maybe next year we should make the language more clear.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Very good report.
Thanks.
All right, I don't seem to have any more questions on this. This was an information item, I checked. So thank you very much for your report. Excellent report. Thank you. And I think we're moving on to summary of board direction.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I've got items in both the elections and the diversity in terms of follow-up. On the elections, I think Kim was clear in terms of additional data as well as experts sort of focusing on the online aspects, and we'll roll that all into the 2020 review. On the diversity, the Toygo Foundation will circle back with the investment office and get you a more specific answer, and then the white papers that we discussed in terms of the importance of diversity in the finance sector, we'll provide that to the board as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, I open it up for public comment. We didn't have any requests for public comment. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So with that, I adjourn the Finance Administration Committee meeting and the board meeting.
10:30.
Board meeting will adjourn, or I'm sorry,